and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Book Friends. Today I want to talk about my top 3 books that I think that beginner readers in fantasy should read. The first one that I want to bring up is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is a standalone story that he wrote about the city of Talair in the capital of Helendron on the world of Nalthus. Now this is a very interesting magic system that involves breaths that can be sold, taken, or otherwise given away. And this makes a really cool economic and ethical conundrum, because the breaths are given to the gods and it makes them have everlasting life. Well, these people are gods, yet they take breaths from their citizenry to keep them as gods. So it's quite interesting in that dilemma. But the story follows 2 young girls, and they are from a foreign city, a foreign capital, and they are sent to the city of Talair to marry the God King. One of them is, and the other one is leaving their home to save her. I really like this story. It's very interesting. I really enjoy the magic system. Of course, Brandon Sanderson is the king of magic systems, so he does a very good job of explaining it, as well as having the characters utilize it in a certain way that is interesting. So I really want people to read this because it is quintessential fantasy, modern fantasy. Brandon Sanderson is one of the best writers of today, and I think if you want to get into fantasy now, that you need to read him. And I think Warbreaker is a fantastic start. I enjoyed it. It's my favorite book of his so far. Although, I don't know, the Stormlight Archive is pretty good. So I would recommend Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson as one of the first stories you should read when getting into adult fantasy. I will be recommending next that you read The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is a story following Loch Lamora, a Scullion who grows up an orphan in the city of Comor. The city of Comor is based off of Venice, so it's honestly a cool setting that you don't often see in fantasy. And it's sort of an urban fantasy, but I thought that I would choose this one to switch it up a bit from the Warbreaker. This has a bit more elements of our real world, although it is not in the real world setting. There is low magic. The magic that comes up is not utilized by the main characters, so you do not see it as often. It still plays a part in the story, but most of the story revolves around Loch Lamora and his group of pickpocketers, con artists, pickpocketers, while they go around and try to make money. They don't really have a goal in mind, which is great. For some of these stories, there's a chosen one or a big plot line that needs to be solved. But in this one, it's just some friends going around trying to con people, and they get into hijinks, and the hijinks bring them into a bigger plot. So I really recommend this as the second book that you pick up when reading adult fantasy, and thank you. Finally, the third and final book that I will recommend that you read whenever you get into adult fantasy is The Dragon Bone Chair. This is one of my favorite series, and it cuts back to more of the traditional fantasy, traditional fantasy setting, traditional fantasy characters, medieval kind of. So it follows Simon through the first third or quarter of the book. He is just a castle scullion in the largest castle on the continent, and you follow him basically doing nothing for about 300 pages, which can seem daunting to some, but once you get past that, you get into a very good story about about friendship and let me cut this out. Friendship and salvation, and there's a riddle of long lost swords. The magic system here is muted, but it's still high fantasy. So just like Brandon Sanderson's book, There is a lot of things that you do not understand that you will need to just read and hope that you get. So, not as challenging as Warbreaker, but maybe a little bit more challenging than Lies of Locke Lamora. The Dragonbone Chair is a great book, and I recommend all three of these if you're going to start adult fantasy. The Dragonbone Chair, Warbreaker, and Lies of Locke Lamora.
I got too many hoes, but they ain't you. You like to put that shit in your nose.